Kathrin, Stephan, it's great to have you here. Thanks for taking the time to talk about this with us today. So, Stephan, you spent the last few years working for fintechs where you had a lot of sensitive data. I hope customers cared a lot about how you handled that data. Question to you, how do you think about the cost of non-compliance for a company like Raisin or Pliant?
Yeah, this works, yes. So for financial services companies, actually, there's another layer of compliance we have to comply with beyond data protection. There's lots of regulation, particularly in the space of know your customer, anti-money laundering, sanctions, these sorts of things that don't necessarily hit all other companies. And there's two aspects of non-compliance with beyond just non-compliance with data protection. Is on the one hand side real regulation, and the supervisor that slaps you with fines could even stop you doing business outright. And secondly, reputational cost, and then it's actually third, and then the cost of complying because you're over-complying or your partners are over-complying. So we see that a lot in fintech and financial services where a lot of companies are sort of immersed in a web of partnerships with other regulated entities, and everyone needs to comply with anti-money laundering rules. And then someone doesn't know exactly about what's the situation, and if you're in doubt, you just, no, let's stop this. And this, of course, costs everyone in the collaboration because then this business is not happening. And that's a real cost, and that's actually the most concerning cost because it's really costs you at business. The other ones you can work with. You can work to comply and to make sure that you meet the rules, and then the chance is lower that you get a fine.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you think it can also hurt your revenue if you don't comply with just the privacy information security side of things? So I get the over-compliance thing, but is it an option really not to comply as a fintech business?
Well, I can only answer, of course not. But then there's gray zones. Now, when I look at certain regulation of how, and this is then more coming from classic banking, so how do I model certain risks? How conservatively do I assume parameters? And there's a gray zone, and I have a room to position how I do this, and accordingly, the impact and the cost will be higher or lower in terms of, for example, capital cost or liquidity cost. So there's room. And also there's not, of course, there's a hard red line if you're overextending this, but there's a room to manage that and also to manage that vis-a-vis the supervisor. Of course, not to comply if there's a given, and that's hard facts, there's a person that's on a sanction list, you're aware, you simply can't transact money for that person. They're clear.
Yeah, fair enough. Kano, for a business like Global Savings Group, do you think it's a bit more relaxed? Do customers care just as much about how you handle the customer data? How do you think about data handling, compliance with privacy, information security, general compliance? Yeah.
Yeah, maybe from the beginning, like Global Savings Group, what are we doing? We are a global savings and rewards company, so there are B2C brands like Schub, that's a cashback company. There's also My Deals, like that's a community business where you found vouchers. But we also run voucher sites together with Focus or other big publishing houses, like maybe CNN and Daily Mail or other brands. So actually, like the topic of compliance is for us always relevant also with regards to our partners, right? As I said, we work together with big media houses, and therefore they rely on our content to be compliant that we put on their sites because their reputation is at stake. On the other hand, we today have shareholders, like they are listed, right? It's M6, it's a listed media company in Paris, and obviously they also rely on us being compliant for them to be compliant on the public markets. And then we come, I think, to the level that you referred to. It's our customers that we have in the B2C business, and there maybe a bit to the history of Global Savings Group. Part of our business is organically grown, but we have also grown massively over the last years in an inorganic way. And why are we doing that? Because we are fueling our business partly also with data sharing between the companies. And to enable growth via cross-selling with between those companies, you need to ensure that you have all your compliance in place that would even allow you transferring data and also allow you making business out of that. So I would assume that maybe with the regards you're referring to, like terms and conditions, I think most people are just like, when they have in the inbox a mail of like there's an update of terms and conditions, they just click and are not looking at it. But the same reason you need to have them up to date, because even if there's a minor group of people like approaching you, it has massive costs in your customer service to work on this group of people.
Fair enough. I think both of you touched on the cost aspects and the aspect of losing revenue if you don't comply. Do you think it can also be an opportunity? Can it set you apart in your respective industries if you make a point of being very protective of customers' data, taking extra good care, etc., etc.?
Well, so my take on that, the cost, first of all, to meet a certain regulation in the sense of compliance, and often these rules are not exactly what helps me as a business. So when I implement to meet these rules, the only way around this is to think ex ante about how can I make use of actually collecting certain data in a KYC process where I need to collect data from a customer to onboard the customer. If I collect the data in a right fashion, I could use that for my business in the future. But that means that whenever there's a rule that I need to comply with and I need to implement in IT systems typically, that I anticipate how I could actually use it for business. Then, of course, in financial service, one is very constrained, so there is not a lot of room, but still, that needs to be a consideration.
On our side, right, as I said, we also run cashback businesses, right? So people collect cashback on their accounts, and therefore for them, it's massively important to like have the reputation to be compliant, because that ensures the reason why you put your cashback on those accounts and not accounts where you are maybe scared of you never will get your cashback in the end.
Yeah, that's fair.
Actually, the cashback is a good example because as a credit card company, we also offer cashback to our customers on the credit card transactions. And already there, you're very quickly in regulated territory because you hold cash that the customer has the right to claim back. And in a way, one could argue this is a deposit. Deposit taking is one of the most regulated activities in the world. And you easily get into borderline territory, and then the way out, and you mentioned that as well, is that you draft your terms and conditions very clearly that actually the cashback that you hold until the customer extracts is not a deposit legally. Thin ice.
Very thin ice, right? But like, yeah, we know it.
So it sounds like you're both very aware of the costs of not being compliant. So presumably, I don't know if you guys have a compliance officer in-house or how you handle that. But if that person came to you and said, I need XYZ solution and I need budget for that, is that a relatively clear business case for you? Or how do you think about that in your head, whether it's worth investing in a certain measure to be compliant?
My experience with sort of meeting very specific compliance rules is you very easily can calculate how much does it cost to get a certain license and the compliance in place. You need to hire some lawyers, some auditors, these sorts of things. And there's a price tag to it, a market price tag, and you can calculate that. And then there's the next level to keep that compliance in place, and you need to hire people. And that's much more difficult to estimate and anticipate how you need to grow that team to actually keep the processes, the regulations, everything in place to keep that. And estimating that's the tricky part. And then I'm not even talking about the hidden cost, like the lost revenues. If it doesn't work out, that's impossible. But at least from a pure cost budgeting point of view, my takeaway is try to think also in what then is the cost down the line beyond just getting it. It's evident. And think it through what you need to have in place, what other service providers you need to in-source or hire to actually keep it, the license and and be compliant with the regulation.
And I personally have to say I'm always like a bit scared if somebody like comes already like before fully having a full picture on like the full problem with a tool that could solve it, right? Like because that's also like an experience that I made. Like there can be like as much tools out there, and the tools can be as good at it, right? If you don't have like the people working on the structures and the processes that make sure that you don't do garbage in, garbage out in your tool, right? If you don't have like a proper groundwork that you can put in your tools, there will never be like a very clear result out of your tool, and your tool cannot support your results that you have, right? So like I usually encourage my teams to be very clear on like what is like our use case, what is our problem statement that we have, what is like the cost that the problems come with, and then afterwards comes what is like the field of solutions for that one.
Yeah, you touched on an interesting point there, which is getting everyone on board internally and making sure people follow processes, right? Because to your point, you can have the best tools in place, but I think compliance is generally still seen as a burden to the business in the sense that there's more documentation, you need to sort of, as we've heard before, you need to follow certain processes. So how do you make sure that you take everyone on that journey and you get people on board before you decide to implement a software solution or hire an in-house team to deal with a certain compliance issue? Kathrin, you want to go first?
I can, of course, right? So like my experience over the last years, and I've always worked in like young growth companies that actually in most cases some of the operational functions were quite happy in the moment that came in a function that wanted to bring a bit of structure to somehow unstructured, unstandardized processes. Right. So in most cases, we try to also bring like the benefit to the table for those teams, right? Have documented processes at one place, maybe also some standardization, right? Coming from our background, right? Working in 18 different countries, right? Having over 1,000 employees, right? Everybody's somehow happy if he knows, hey, when I change a password, this is the process how we change passwords, right? So not everybody does it different. So I think you just like always when you come with your share of like that you want to have, bring something to the table that the other ones like have as a pain point since a long time, right? And they will just like transport your pain with their pain.
Yeah, my experience in financial services, as a lot of the regulation is so central to the business, and as a fintech trying to operate into something in an environment where often as you start as a fintech, you don't completely know and understand how it actually works, this banking, financial services regulation. My learning was, or my experience was actually that everyone came together and said, yeah, we need to crack this, and it's a challenge that's worth cracking, because only if we crack the challenge, how do we comply with this? How do we make this work that we can send customer data from one bank onto another bank, for example, and how does it work technically? Does it comply with the rules? How does this all square, which is a very complex game that you play? There was a positive energy out of it that everyone wanted to solve it. I must admit, with data protection, I've seen different cases where people regarded it more as a tick box exercise, and it wasn't that fun because they didn't see the benefit.
Yeah, fair.
But I'm sure you guys have a good solution to that here, no?
We have an amazing solution.
Yes, and I actually on this one I can add on, right? That because we are a customer of DataGuard, and actually like one of the things that was very helpful is because there are standards, there are templates, right? Like where you know, okay, if I work alongside that, right, the team can still tick their boxes, but you still get like the full extent out of it, right? Where you can support them somehow on like how to tick the boxes. So my experience is that like it helped like to have something that is somehow thought in a way on the process of like data protection, especially, right? Where you on the one hand have a specialist that can give you special advice for the individual cases, but where everything that is standard in companies runs in a standard procedure.
Yeah. Perhaps just on the point of innovation, I think a lot of people, as you guys mentioned earlier, a lot of people can perceive compliance as hindering growth and innovation, especially in a fast-growing business, and especially if people don't really see the sense in it, like data protection, for example. Do you also feel like it can drive innovation? You mentioned people work collaboratively to try and figure out an issue. You have to do KYC, so how do you do it in the best way possible? Do you feel like having that regulation and the need to comply can sometimes help be faster and more innovative in those processes?
Well, in financial services, yes. If you compare fintech to incumbent, or I might even call them legacy financial institutions, then yes, because sometimes we have the opportunity to find something that works better and more efficient. The product that we provide, for example, is much more flexible than credit cards that you can get with a regular bank, for example. And then still we try to operate within what's the rules and how they need to be interpreted and kept.
I think exactly on the point of interpreted, right? In the most cases, all those regulations that you're following, they are not black and white. And somehow the art in the roles that are around compliance, risk controls, everything is about showing the operational business. So this is black and this is white, and in between is gray. And that is probably this where you need to come in with your innovation, right, to fill this space, right? And we are somehow giving the guidance on like what is left and right.
All right, perfect. I think we're almost out of time. Do you have any final words of advice to any compliance officers in the room that are trying to make a business case, why it's worth investing in team, building out teams, buying solutions? I know you mentioned process and really thinking all the way, Kanu, before you come and present a solution.
So I can only give the advice, right? Like most of the people that also presented that today are coming from fast-growing companies, right? And sometimes it is worse, as a compliance function, to take over a topic that is not fully in your area, just to make your footprint and your reputation within the company. Right? We have that sometimes that like teams in compliance take over a team case where they would actually say, hey, that's a cleanup task for one of our COM teams. And they just structure it in a way it's like very well done. And therefore they have like a bargaining chip for the next thing they want to have from somebody else, right? Sometimes it's worth it to invest in like topics that are maybe not close to compliance, just like to gain additional reputation within the teams.
Yeah, my take is if you have a regulation that you need to comply with, in particular if you are a startup that wants sort of to challenge the world or conquer the world, try to challenge the regulation and try to find a smart way to actually solve the thing the regulation wants to solve. Because a lot of the regulation out there is in the end too bureaucratic to actually be meaningful and efficient, and try to outsmart it without non-compliance, so that you are more efficient.
Yeah, having said that, please be compliant, please protect the people behind the data. That's why we're here, in case you want to outsource that. No, perfect. Thanks a lot, Kanu and Stephan. Amazing.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.